In this video, I'll be walking through how I installed a roof vent onto my van. I used a tape measure and pen to take my measurements, a footstep so I could reach the roof, an 80mm hole saw, Hammerite paint to avoid any rust, and Sikaflex to prevent leaks. I started by measuring the roof so there'd be enough space for the hole, settling on 15cm away from the groove. I then moved on to the inside of the van and made a marking at 12.5cm as that was the middle point of the raised section of the roof. Once I was happy with the measurements, I was ready to cut the first hole. I started by drilling a pilot hole to make sure I'd be as accurate as possible. And once that was done, I switched over to the 80mm hole saw. This was the main reason I chose this specific roof vent, as you only have to cut one hole, which makes the installation as simple as possible. Cutting the hole took some time, but that was mostly down to my inexperience and using the cheapest hole saw I could find, as I was probably only going to use it this one time. Once I could see the shape on the roof, I started cutting from the other side, and cutting downwards was much easier. If you do plan to stand on the roof, make sure to put your weight on the structural sections to avoid any dents or damage. Once the hole was made, I cleaned the area and painted the exposed metal. This would help to avoid rust further on down the line. Once the paint had dried, I placed the vent through the hole, but it wasn't quite fitting right, so I used a file to make the hole slightly larger, before reapplying the paint again. When the vent fits correctly, all of the contact points should meet the roof, creating a full seal to prevent any leaks. The instructions didn't say you needed to use Sikaflex, but I used some to be on the safe side. After carefully placing the vent on the roof, it was time to screw it on from the inside. There were 3 different length screws included to account for different roof thicknesses. One issue I had with this vent was a small piece of misshaped plastic that was blocking the screw socket, but after removing it with a Stanley knife, I started by tightening it by hand, being careful not to push the roof vent up, before finishing it off with a screwdriver. And once that was done, I clipped on the bracket so the vent could be opened and closed. After that, the last thing that needed to be done was threading out the Sikaflex evenly with a wet paintbrush, which ended up being a little bit of a mess, but at least it's out of sight. For written instructions and a full item list, check the link in the description. There'll also be a link to the playlist where you can find all of my campervan conversion videos in order.